Hi, my name is Courtney Scales, and this is my intervention system project about the TEACH program. The TEACH program stands for the Training and Education of Autistic and Other Communication Handicapped Children, and it was started by Dr. Eric Schopfler. He was actually born in Germany, and his family was Jewish, so they fled from the Nazis to America and settled in the New York area when he was about 10. And this is a really interesting fact to know about him because when he was a young child living in Nazi Germany, some of the different things he saw and witnessed, even at such a young age, 7, 8, 9 years old, are things that impacted him for the rest of his life and stuck with him to where he pursued psychology. And when he relocated to Chapel Hill, some of these things he had witnessed with other kids living in Nazi Germany were things that kind of fueled his research and his ideas and ways of thinking, and wanted to learn more about certain types of theories. And he had his own theories on how the brain worked and how certain types of conditions impacted children instead of the way that many others in society viewed these. He's credited with being one of the first people to recognize autism as a treatable neurological condition instead of a psychological condition, which is interesting because during this time period, many people thought that autism was a result of the parents, especially the mothers would receive a lot of blame for a child with autism. They would blame parenting styles and different other things. And he actually published an article after he had been doing some research and stuff with the headline as parents as scapegoats, because he thought that the many people were using parents as a scapegoat instead of actually doing the research to find out more about autism and what it truly is. They're kind of taken, under his view, kind of taking the easy way out and just blaming the parents instead of actually learning about what causes these children to think the way that they do. And he published over 200 different books and articles on autism. He co-founded the University of North Carolina Chapel Hill division of the TEACH program, and he worked as a professor and researcher for the University of North Carolina for their School of Medicine, specifically focused on autism and how to better educate and serve those with autism for over 40 years. The TEACH program is specifically designed for children with autism and other types of communication disabilities that are similar to autism, but it can be used with people of all ages. Many of the research and the program of TEACH focuses on children, but a lot of the concepts of it and the general principles can be applied with anybody of any age. The TEACH program follows 5 basic principles. The first is physical structure, the way the room is physically set up for daily activities like eating and playing and classwork, and they even say that things like messy classwork should be separated from things that are more structured, like math or writing, and each area of learning should be kind of separated by actual barriers. That way the students can physically see, which activity is taking place and should take place in which area, which spot it belongs to. And another principle of the TEACH program is the consistent schedule. They will have a visual schedule displayed on the wall with different pictures or drawings. That way the students know what to expect and when it's happening. And so this may be a longer looking schedule with maybe 10 or 15 different things on it. And then what a lot of TEACH schools will do is they'll have the big schedule posted with all of the different daily things that are going to happen that day. And then the child will have a smaller schedule, like the size of a note card or a little larger, that will have just 3 things on their schedule. And so the smaller schedule will typically have what they're supposed to be working on right now, what's coming next, and then what's happening then. So it'll be a present, a next, and then a then. And then that way the student has the consistent schedule that they can view on the wall or in another area that's visual, and they can see what's happening throughout the entire day, and they kind of know what's coming up. And then the little card helps them focus on exactly what they need to be focused on, what's happening now, and then what they're going to do next. Student work should be designed to promote independence and be able to communicate things and objects with the student with a minimum of written instructions. They should be things that are more closed-ended and promote the student to be independent, but without having to use a lot of written instruction. Part of the TEACH program focuses on routine and sticking to the student's routine and the daily routine as much as possible, since this helps a student with autism be successful in the classroom. A visual structure of displaying the visually based cues to remind the student of classroom practices or instructions, which this is kind of, you can see it like anchor charts and list of rules and things like that would all count. But in the TEACH program, instead of it being listed as words or rules, they would use rely really heavily on pictures or diagrams and drawings and things like that to remind the students. It may have just one or two words instead of an entire sentence or paragraph. The first evidence-based study that I focused on is one that compared the effectiveness of the TEACH program to other different kinds of methods. They focused primarily on a preschool setting, and they compared the TEACH program to methods like the Learning Experience and Alternative Program for Preschoolers and Their Parents, also known as LEAP. And they also studied some preschools that use non-model specific programs. So some of these programs may have been a combination of both the TEACH program as well as the LEAP program. All of the students in this study made gains in social communication and fine motor skills regardless of the teaching method that they used. And they concluded that there were no real difference between the different models regarding the students' progress over time. So basically, what they concluded was that it didn't matter which method was being used in the preschool. All of the students were making more than adequate progress in the different areas that they focused on, which were social communication and fine motor, since these are three of the areas that education programs with autism tend to focus on. Some of the limitations that were brought up by this study are that only high quality classrooms were used. So it leads to the question of whether the data can actually be generalized across a larger population, since they specifically only chose high quality programs that were already top rated programs that specialized in teaching children with disabilities related to autism primarily. And also, students of that age, when working with preschoolers, they're naturally going to make progress regardless of whatever methods are being used in that classroom. So some of that has to be, factored in. And also another limitation that they discussed during the article were how many of these programs have so many commonalities. And one of the interesting things I think about the TEACH program is it really was one of the primary, one of the forefathers of evidence-based programs for students with autism. And so many of these other studies and many of the other programs and teaching methods, I think, have roots that can be traced back to certain things that Dr. Eric Schopler discussed in this program. They may not mimic it exactly, but I think there are certain areas that are very similar that we can say that we see today in classrooms, in special ed classrooms especially, as far as, the visual picture charts and the knowing that students with autism and other types of disabilities related and similar to autism thrive on the routine and the scheduled, the structure, and following the visual picture charts and things like that. I know you can see those kinds of things in all kinds of different special ed settings, no matter what method or program that the study is actually using. So that was one of the things that they discussed as a limitation, because many programs have so many commonalities that can be traced back to the TEACH program and other similar programs that it's hard to actually look at the data based on how they're different when they have so many commonalities and similarities. It's hard to actually say, is progress made because of some of these differences, or is progress being made because of all these things they have in common. And another study that I read about focused on the comprehensiveness of the ABA, which is the Applied Behavior Analysis Program, or TEACH, to try to identify if special educators had a preference towards one program above another. And they concluded that there were no clear preference among educators, that educators cited benefits to each program. And they did not find that any program they didn't find a big difference between the applied behavior analysis or the TEACH program as far as the significantly higher levels of social validity for the components. They were inherent in both approaches. So both approaches showed that the children had successively obtained higher levels of social interactions and social things that they were measuring during the study. So this would lead them to believe that both approaches have strong evidence-based components that significantly impact individuals with autism. This video is one that actually shows the TEACH intervention being used in a preschool classroom, and it's kind of a neat video because it tells how the intervention is used from a student perspective. So it shows you follow a preschooler, and she takes you through her school and kind of shows you what she does each day, and you get a really good picture of how the different routines work and how the picture schedule works and some of the different components of the TEACH intervention. You can actually see them in a preschool setting classroom, which is kind of neat. And in this video right here is actually a video autobiography that was recorded with Dr. Shopler about a year before he ended up passing away, and it has a lot of excerpts from him and interviews and recordings of him discussing the TEACH method and some different things about his life. And it also has some interviews from parents that he worked with in the beginning of the TEACH program. And it's a longer video, but it's really informative and kind of gives you an insight to what the world kind of looked like as far as special education and autism specifically during the time period when he was first emerging as a young professor. And it's kind of interesting to see that he was really one of the ones that broke the mold and was kind of more radical thinking. When he came out and said, you know, I don't think parents are the ones to blame for this, he was kind of viewed as a young professor that probably didn't know what he was talking about, you know, at the time. And he faced a lot of adversity for that, and was not as respected because he would come out and say things like that and write articles about parents being the scapegoats on these things, completely going against what academia had already set as the standard, where parents were the cause. And so he completely kind of rebelled against that. And he also helped break the mold of working with the parents. He said that he saw the parents as collaborators and part of the process, and he worked side by side with them. At the time, what would normally happen with many of these therapies is when they would come to work with the children, the parents would, you know, come and wait in a waiting area, and then the therapist would take them, and then they come drop them back off. But there was really no collaboration or communication, more than just kind of letting them know what they had worked on. Parents weren't viewed as partners in the process. And Dr. Shopler was one of the first ones that said, no, you know, these parents need to be partners of this process, and worked, you know, side by side, and really got to know and build a relationship with the parents of the children he was working with. And so this was a really kind of different and radical idea back in that day and time, especially regarding parents of students with autism, because they were kind of viewed more as, you know, inferior and ineffective at educating their child, because many others blamed them for their child having autism. And instead, there were some parents on the video that said that the way he approached it was almost life-changing for them, to actually have somebody come and say, no, you're not the cause of this, and let me, you know, work with you side by side so we can come up with some ways to help your child. And so that was really kind of revolutionary of the time. So I thought this, there's one more of the online learning opportunities. I thought this was a really neat tool through the TEACH program. There's actually some learning opportunities through the University of North Carolina, their TEACH program. They offer some online courses and webinars. Some of them are free, and other ones were low cost, and some of them did count as continuing education credits. And some of the courses were only $10, and they all focused on different things related to autism spectrum disorder. I guess they update every so often. I think it said quarterly, but that was kind of a neat tool I found to keep in mind. And so this was my project on the TEACH program, and I'm glad I chose this one. I think it was really interesting to learn a lot about this program.